So if you're anything like me, OP-07 is coming out and you're wondering what is going to be good to play. In particular, are any of the new leaders good? Well, today, hopefully we're going to kind of answer that question for you. Basically, what we're going to do today is just have a look at some deck lists of the new leaders from OP-07. So we've got 6 new leaders to look at, so we'll get stuck into that for you guys in just a moment. But if you guys do want to join our community, we've got our Discord. Check it out in the link in the description down below. And if you want to see our other OP-07 videos which we've done already, which is a pre-release tips and a meta kind of breakdown and deck lists coming for OP-07, check them out. They'll be up in the cards or down in the description as well. Oh, by the way, yeah, definitely join the Discord. We've got a winner box tournament coming up for OP-07, so if you guys want to jump in, get in on that, make sure you're in the Discord because that's where it will be. One other thing before we jump into the sim and have a look at some deck lists. Typically, we only can't really show profiles that we're kind of happy with on the channel, and that's usually when the set has released and we've got the cards in our hands. And so today you're going to kind of get a little bit of an insight of how, like, the background, kind of how that works with us coming up with deck profiles. Typically what we'll do is what we're going to show you here is got a starting point for our deck list, and we play, test, muck around a bit on the sim at locals, that sort of stuff, and then if we're happy with the build, then we do an official profile with cards and everything like that. But this is a great starting point for us, great starting point for you guys as well if you want to figure out where you can start with some of the new leaders from OP-07. So first of all, let's talk about Boa Hancock right over here. So Boa Hancock's mono blue leader, 5,000 power, 5 life. The effect for Boa is during your turn, once per turn, when a character leaves play from the field from one of your abilities, and if you have 5 or less cards, you can draw a card. Blue, we know blue's very good at removing cards. So this effect is actually fairly easy to use. We've got a lot of cards that we can use for counter as well. So you're always going to be around that 5 or less cards anyway. So always nice to rebuild your hand. Now we'll just run through the list here. So we're running 4 Mihawks in the list, 9 cost, 9,000 body. On play, you're bottom decking something with a 7 cost or less, which is really good. Helps trigger your leader's abilities. Basically, your big boss monster of the deck here. Big body, you're hitting most things. There's a few other things in the meta, like maybe Captain Kid or Gecko Moria, that you're not really gonna hit there, but we do have some other options to help you remove those bigger boys. Running 4 copies of the vanilla Gecko Moria. This one's really good because it pairs with the Jinbei, which we'll talk about in a second. Jinbei can basically play out the Gecko Moria. Next up, running 3 copies of Pudding. Pudding's just really good against most decks that want to build a big hand size, or decks that like to kind of sculpt their hand a fair bit. So yeah, really good. Next, we're running 4 copies of a Crocodile. This is a new one from OP-07. It is a 2k counter, 4 cost, 5,000 body. On play, rest a Don, and then you can return a 2 cost or lower character to the owner's hand. That in certain matchups is really useful. Other ones, yeah, not so much. There's some decks that run always cards higher than that, but there's a few decks that run some lower ones. You just got to be careful. You don't want to bounce back searches or other important things there, but can be pretty good for you with some low blockers. Is also a searchable card. It can be recycled from your Gecko Moria here as well. The Jinbei we touched on briefly before, running full play set here, 4 cost, 5,000 body, 1,000 counter. On play, you can play a 4 cost or lower 7 Warlords from your hand other than Jinbei. So you can play out the Gecko Moria, you can play out the other Gecko Moria, which then recycle something from your trash. You can play out the Mihawk as well, so you can generate some draw power if you need. You can also play out that Crocodile, which we spoke about before, and then you can also play out the Searcher Sengoku, which we'll talk about next, running 4 copies. 1 cost, searching the top 5 for a 7 Warlords, adding to your hand, the rest go to the bottom deck in any order. So you're basically searching all your characters except for your Pudding and your promo Luffy, and the only event you're searching here is the Perfume. The rest of these guys are not searchable there. So yeah, if you're missing some characters, great one to use. Next up, 4 copies of Boa Hancock. This is a new super rare from OP-07. Cost you 6, 8,000 body. Another kind of your boss kind of monster characters for the deck. On play, one of your opponent's characters other than a Luffy cannot attack during the next turn, and then you can bottom deck something with a cost of 1 or less. So that second part of the effect only will come up depending on what matchups you face. There are some ones that have some dom manipulation or searches or other things like that. You can bottom deck, which is quite nice. Otherwise, that first bit of the effects actually, yeah, really good. Next, this one's running 3 copies of the promo Luffy. So promo 55, 4 cost, 5,000 body, 1,000 counter. On play, you trash 2 cards from your hand, and then your opponent bottom decks one of their characters. So your opponent does choose, so it's really good if they've got one character, or you kind of use some of your other removal to remove things, and then they're forced to maybe bottom deck one of their bigger guys. But this card, yeah, really good. 3 tempted, may run 4 copies on there. This might be a bit hard to find as well, but worthwhile trying to look into before the set gets closer, because it's probably going to spike up in price if Boa has some popularity. I feel this card is fairly decent to run in the deck. Gecko Morio, I've mentioned a couple of times, 4 copies here, 4 cost, on play, add a 7 Warlords type card with cost of 4 or less to your hand other than itself. Next, running 4 copies of Mihawk, a 2k counter, which allows you to draw 2, trash 2 if you've got a Don attached when attacking. So most of the time just used as a 2k counter, which can be recycled, but otherwise if you're really struggling to get some draw power, you need it, you can play it out. Can be cheated out with the Jinbei as well. Now moving on to the events, we're running 2 copies of the 0 cost event, buff something by 3,000 by trashing a card. The triggers you can bounce at 2 cost or less to hand as well, so that does come up, otherwise most of the time just used as that 3k power boost. 3,000 swords, form of removal, bottom decking 5 cost or less. This comes up, I'd say, in a decent amount of matches. Sometimes I'm tempted to just run an extra copy of the Red Rock and the Gravity Blade, but there are some matchups where that's actually nice. So we'll do a bit more playtesting, kind of keep you updated. If you guys have played a lot of Boa, let me know what you prefer in terms of your ratios. But yeah, not a bad form of removal there. More removal, Red Rock, bottom decking anything. So really good with those characters that Mihawk can't hit or your Gravity Blade can't hit. So yeah, great options. But yeah, another form of removal is Luffy, which hits anything as well. 3 copies of Gravity Blade, cost you 7, bottom decking 2 things with the cost of 6 or less. And then the last card in the deck here is Perfume, which is basically like your Diable Jambe, but for 7 Warlords. So you're buffing it by 2,000 and then becomes unblockable. So you can use it on any of your characters, your leader, that sort of stuff. Great finisher in the deck. Running 2 copies of, you could maybe bump it down to 1 and run something else in the forms of your removal or something like that, because Sengoku does search it, but I find 2 is useful to have. Next, let's talk about Bonney green. We love a bit of green. I've actually got 2 versions of this here that I can't be mucking around with, but this kind of seems to be the most consistent because it's everything kind of really synergizes fairly well. So with Bonney, for those of you who don't know, Bonney is a mono green, 5 life, 5,000 power. On your opponent's attack, you can rest a Don and rest one of their leaders or characters just once. So it can be kind of annoying to play against, especially if there's only 1 character, 1 leader on board. Yeah, you're just resting something, so your opponent's always going to have 1 less attack, which is nice. Your opponent can slightly play around this, especially if they're playing red or things that have a lot of rush. Can play around it, but most of the time a bit annoying for your opponent. As I mentioned before, this one synergizes fairly well, so many supernovas in this build here. So running 4 copies of the new Cavendish, 5 cost, 6,000 body on play and when attacking. If your leader supernova, which Bonney is, and you have no other Cavendish on field, you can restand 2 Don. Really good to help you use your leader's ability a few times or play out some other characters. Scratch Manapoo is just a searchable 2k counter. Sometimes, very rarely, you can use that on play effect to rest something, but usually it's just a blocker when you want to try and finish game. Running 4 copies of Ezo, 2k counter, also allows you to rest, not searchable though. 4 copies of Kid, the brick wall, we all know Kid, 8 cost, 8,000 body, Don times 1. If it's rested, your opponent has to attack into this character, and you can also cheat out a 3 cost or less character by resting it. Rosinante is really good in this particular build because it helps protect your Kid. Full playset of Hody Jones, great finisher, lets you rest a bunch of things, Don, blockers, all that sort of stuff, so really good. Zoro, also a really good card here in the deck. We're running a few chunky boys in this one, but Zoro, good in like the mirror match, helps you deal with other kids. Really good into like a Nell as well, the Zoro, so yeah, great one to run there. 3 copies of that one, not searchable though, so there is maybe an argument to bump it up to 4, but 3 feels okay so far. Urogue, a great blocker, 4 cost, 5,000 body. Unfortunately can't cheat out of the Kid, but it makes your leader's ability live every single turn, because end of your turn you can set one of your Don as active. Hawkins, another great one, is a blocker in this build because your leader is Supernova, and the effect is once per turn if this card would leave the field in any way, shape or form, so it means bouncing the hand, bottom decking, trashing, KOing, you can rest one of your opponent's characters instead. Can be played around fairly easily if your opponent has just 1 kind of character or no characters on board. If they have multiple, a little bit easier for you to use this effect. So usually better to play out on a wider board. But is actually a really good one in this build. Bart's a blocker, but your turn once per turn, if something is rested by one of your effects, you can draw 1, trash 1. So your Bonney, you can get it off with Bonney, you can kind of filter your hand that way. Trigger every time you use your Kid's ability to rest itself to then cheat out a blocker. It can also trigger if you have that out and you play Hody Jones, which rest some things, and you can get the draw 1 trash on from there as well. Bonney, running 4 of, just a searcher, supernova searcher in the deck, Scratch Minnatopia, searchable 2k counter, and then your only event you're running in this deck is 3 copies of the 0 cost event. So the only cards not searchable in the deck are your 0 cost event, Ezo, Rosinante, Hody Jones, and Zoro. Everything else in the deck is searchable. We'll take a quick squeeze at one that I've been slightly playing around with. This one, I'd like Doflamingo as a kind of boss character over Kid a lot more, just because it's better into a few more matchups, better into like your red purple lore, just because it's harder for your opponent to deal with. Then that 10 cost 10,000 body is a lot harder to cost reduce to then bottom deck, whereas the Kid's a little bit easier to cost reduce and then swing into a few more times. But this is, a brief little overview of a build. We haven't played too much for this one, so take this one with a grain of salt. Basically what we've done here is taken out the Kids, replaced it with the Doflamingos, taken out the Rosinates, and replaced it with 2 Yamatos, the Secret Rare double attack banish. Makes the yellow matchup a little bit nicer. And then the Bonney is another one that we've replaced. On play, one of the opponent's rested Donner characters don't become active, so you can throw your opponent off curve. Mini Doflamingo, nice one. Next, let's talk about a D-Dragon character, Monkey D-Dragon. We've got a red mono one. Nice to see a few more mono leaders. We've seen 3 so far. 5,000 power, 5 life leader. Activate main once per turn. Give up to 2 of your already attached on to a character. So that Dom manipulation is actually fairly nice. We're kind of running with the theme of that in this deck here. But let's kind of run through it here. So running 4 copies of Kid and Killer, just a great rush card. Will become a 7k attack if your opponent's on 2 or less life. Otherwise can be just good to swing in anyway. Running 3 copies of the Chopper. So this one's from EBO 1, 3 cost 4,000 body, 1,000 counter. Blocker, really nice. But Don times 2 when attacking, you can minus something by 3,000 power. So that minusing can be good to help you to swing into some characters or make blockers really low, so your opponent's not likely to use them, or they'll be sacrificed kind of thing. But a part of it that does synergize fairly well with your leaders. You attaching 2 Don using the effect, then you can move those 2 Don to somewhere else with your leader's ability. On a similar train of thought, we've got 4 copies of Sanji here. Sanji is mainly going to use as a 2k counter, but sometimes you can use the effect and then use your leader's ability to shift the Don that you gain from the effect here. So activate main once per turn, add a card from the top of your life to your hand. Sanji then gets 2,000 power buff, and then you can add 2 rested Don to Sanji. So it gets to a point where you need to be a bit aggressive. You play him out, you wait a turn, hopefully it survives, trigger the effect. You're going up to 7k, you can swing, and then you can shift the Don that you've attached with the Sanji to something else with your leader's ability. Once again, similar kind of theme with our full playset of Luffy from OP-01. 2 cost 3,000 character, 1,000 counter. Don times 2 cannot be KO'd when battling strike attribute characters, and then activate main once per turn, give this character up to 2 rested Don. So you can play some characters out, attach the Don to Luffy with Luffy's effect, then use your leader's ability to attach it to something else after you've swung and done some other shenanigans. Makino, 2k counter, can buff some of your little characters, which we'll talk about in a moment. Carries through really good. Your leader is a revolutionary army type, so you're going to be reducing your opponent's leader by 1,000 power. If this guy sticks, makes winning so much easier, absolutely insane. Have multiple out that stick, look, you're basically guaranteeing yourself a win there. You can give something, leader or character, minus 1,000 on play and when attacking if you have 7,000 power or more. On the turn that you're attacking, attach to Don, swing it, minus the leader or character, then use your leader's ability to shift the Don somewhere else. Koala, just good 2k counter. That gives you a power reduction because your leader is a revolutionary army type. Robin, running 3 copies of Robin. So Robin helps you KO stuff with 1,000 power less. With the Chopper and the Koala, that becomes a bit bigger. Good into black like the Lucci, you can carry the Rebecca's fairly easily, don't need to do too much there. Running full playset of the new Dragon Super Rare. This is a rush, 8 cost 9,000 body. On play, you can give 2 rested Don to anything. So you can give it to itself, you can give it to the leader, but then you can shift that with your leader's ability afterwards. Next, running a full playset of Koala. This is a promo. I'm not exactly sure when we're getting this, so this may need to be kind of edited out of this, but it's a Don manipulation thing, so you can shift any rested Don to attach to a character or a leader, similar with the Nami here. So both of these together, you can play out a bunch of characters, use all your Don. You can then activate these guys to attach a Don to your leader, swing with the leader, use the leader's ability, shift the Don somewhere else. You kind of see what's happening here with this deck. 3 copies of the Rush Luffy, which becomes unblockable with your 2 Don attached to it, and then our events rounding off 3 Rad Beam, and then 2 of the 0 cost events. All right, let's take a look at my favorite character, Foxy. Love this arc. I know a lot of people hate it, but let me know in the comment section below why I'm wrong as to why this arc's great. But let's talk about Foxy. Mono leader again, 5,000 power, 5 life purple. When attacking, Don -3. If you have 3 or more Foxy pirates in play, you can basically stun 2 of your opponent's characters. In particular, they don't become active. So when they're rested, they don't become active, so you can't stun active characters. They must be rested, they can't restand during the refresh phase. This deck, I would love it to be a lot better. It's kind of 1 or 2 better Foxy Pirates cards from being a fairly decent deck, but let's run through, see what we got here. 4 copies of Kid helps you regain that Don, especially with your leader's ability. Multiples of them out is really good. Running 2 copies of Kamazu, mainly for the 2k counter. Sometimes that KOing ability can come up, so basically that ability is when a Don is returned to your Don deck and KO something with 2 cost or less. So some matchups that's useful, other times just use the 2k counter. First of our Foxy Pirates here, we're running Itomimi. So this one is a 3 cost, 0 power, so it can be removed fairly easily in most matchups, but the effect is activate main. If your leader is Foxy Pirates, you can basically ramp a Don. Don't have to rest him or anything like that, so it can be protected, and depending on what matchups you go into, so you can build up your Don back up again, which is quite nice. Capote, also a really good one, 3 cost, 4,000 body, on play Don -1. Something with a 6 cost or less cannot attack, so a great form of stun. This one can be done on an active character as well as a rested character. Next up, running 4 copies of the new Sanji. If we have 2 or less Don, then our opponent, this becomes a 3 cost character in hand, is a blocker, really nice. Gina is a 2k counter that is searchable and can be a form of ramp for your Don. So the on play is if your leader's Foxy type, if you have less or equal Don than your opponent, you can ramp a Don active, 1 cost, that's actually not too bad. Chopper, really good one here as a blocker. On play, you can ramp a Don if you're equal or less Don than your opponent. Pickles is not a bad one, can help you in like your black matchup in particular. So if you have less or equal Don than your opponent, all your other Foxy characters cannot be KO'd by effects except for itself. So Pickle can still be KO'd, but it protects all your other guys. Foxy is really good in the deck. So Foxy 7 cost, 7,000 body. On your opponent's turn, all your opponent's characters have -1,000 power. Insane, have a few of these out, -2,000 power. It's hard for your opponent to do anything when things are negged that much. And then activate main, you can ramp a Don. Next we have Porsche, which is like semi kind of your searcher. On play Don -1, look at the top 5. You can add a Foxy Pirates to your hand, and then you can play out a character with 4,000 power or lower. So it allows you to cheat out a few things, in particular your Itomimi, your Capote, your Chopper, your Pickles. They're your main ones that you cheat out. If you need to, you can cheat out the Monda. And speaking of Monda, this is probably the worst Foxy Pirate there is out there, but it can come up sometimes. 2 cost, 3,000 body, 1,000 counter, activate main. You can trash this character to ramp yourself a Don rested. Only time I really use it if your board's kind of full, you can attach some Don swing and then use the effect to ramp a Don. Your boss monster outside of your Foxy is your Rush Kaido, really good, Don -5, KO something, cost of 6 or less, and then get some Rush. Another form of removal here, running 2 copies of Ragnarok, Don -1, KO something with an 8 cost or less. Slow Beam Sword, 2 copies of it here, 2 cost counter, Don -1, buff something by 2,000, then rest one of your opponent's characters, any character, no power or cost stipulation going on there. And then rounding off, we've got 2 copies of the Megadon Ninetales Rush, which basically allows you to restand your leader or your Foxy character to swing again. Some other notable cards you could probably run in here. The Miss Double Finger kind of synergizes with the Porsche there, can also get your character to play out. So if you want to swap that out for the Kamazo, that's not a bad option there. Another option we can work out to put in here is Reiju. Helps you fill your hand, draw power, that sort of stuff. It will be a bit hard to get this effect off when you come up against Red Purple Lords, because their Dom will be fairly low, but your leader does have the same kind of ability as their leader, so you could probably match that, be a bit better. And so Reiju is probably not a bad one to run in there as well. It's hard to try and find space for Reiju. Maybe drop in the Sanji for the Reiju is probably the best way to go, because you want to keep as many Foxy Pirates up there so you can use your leader's ability. So yeah, something to think about. Maybe we'll have an update on this in the future. All right, Lucci, black deck. This is probably going to be one of the meta decks. It's in our kind of meta analysis video, so go check that out if you haven't. But Lucci, for those that don't know, when attacking, trash 2 cards from top of your deck, you can minus something by 1 cost during the turn. First of all, run 2 copies of Spandine. This one on play, return 3 cards of CP from your trash to the bottom of your deck, and then you can play 1 4 cost or lower CP character from from your trash rested, so you can spam out a few of your searches or your cost reduction stuff going on there with this guy. 2 copies of Brook, so this is form of removal and cost reduction. 3 cost on play and when attacking, minus something by 1 cost, then KO something with a 0 cost, so you can synergize well with your Lucci's leader there to KO some blower characters. Suru, 2 copies of it, 2k counter, also some cost reduction, minus something by 2 on play. 2 copies of Borsellino, great blocker, great into the mirror match, really hard to remove. Next, we're running 4 copies of Kaku from OP-03. 5 cost, 6,000 body, 1,000 counter on play, bottom deck 2 CP stuff from your trash, and then you can KO something with a cost of 3 or less, with a leader cost of 4 or less, some of the other cost reduction that gets bigger and bigger. So Kaku, really good. Khalifa, 2k counter that also allows you to draw 2 trash 2 and minus something by 2 cost as well. So very, very versatile. Can be spammed out in a few different ways, from hand, from spammer, from trash. Gecko Moria from trash as well. Rebecca can recycle it from trash, just can't play it out from your hand. Spandam's your searcher. You look at the top 3 for a CP type and add it to your hand, rest get trashed. Sabo, great for some protection, great in the mirror match especially as well. A blocker on play, stuff can't be KO'd, and then you draw 2 trash 2. Rebecca, we've mentioned briefly, there's a blocker on play, return something with a cost of 3 or 7 to your hand. So you're basically returning everything in the deck character wise except for the Gecko Moria and the Stussy, and then you can play out something with a cost of 3 or less. Brook's a great target to play. Spandam's a great target to play as well. You can get some double recycle from your trash going on there. Otherwise, some of your cost reduction stuff in your Tsuru and your Helmeppo, great to play off there, and your Spandam's another great option just to get some more search going on. Lucci, form of removal here. We know Lucci plays 3 cards from the trash to the bottom of your deck, KO something cost of 2 and a cost of 1 or less. Gecko Moria helps you recycle everything in the deck here, except for the Sabo and the Stussy. Every one of your characters can be recycled or played out. So we've seen plenty of plays where Lucci's played out as the active character, Suru, or like your Helmeppo played out as your rested ones to get cost reduction and KOing, combine that with your leader, get a few other things in KO range there quite easily. Kaku's another CP character, which is a 4 cost 2,000 counter on play, bottom deck 2 CP cards from your trash, and then you can minus something by 3 cost. So running 3 copies of that there. Stussy, this is a great form of removal, 9 cost, 9,000 body on play. Place one of your characters in the trash, then you can KO one of your opponent's characters. So you can trash like your searches or some of your other cards you can recycle fairly easily, so that's not too bad there. Helmeppo, we've spoken about a few times, 2 cost on play, minus something by 3 cost. Moving on to the events, running 2 copies of Finger Pistol, 4 cost, trash 2 cards from the top of your deck, and then KO something with a cost of 5 or less. The triggers activate them, the same thing there. 3 copies of Ice Age, minus something by 5 cost, or trigger KO something with a cost of 3 or less. And then Tempest Kick, this card's really good, basically is replacing the Great Eruption for black decks. Main, you can draw a card, and then if you have 10 or more cards in your trash, you can minus something by 3 cost, and then triggers, you can KO something with 3 cost or less. And finally, we're going to talk about old Vegapunk. This one probably struggled the most over in the Japan meta. There weren't any kind of topping lists to kind of go with, but we've play tested a little bit to kind of come up something here that we think it has some great potential in here. So Vegapunk, very interesting leader. Mono leader, yellow, 5,000 power, but starts with just 2 life, and this leader cannot attack. So the effect is activate main. You can rest it on, place 1 5 cost or lower card, not character, so keep that in mind. That is an egghead type from your hand face up in your life or into play. Few options there. So basically, kind of early on, you're going to be either building your board or building your life, combination of both. And basically, that's kind of what this whole deck revolves around as well. So you're going to have some good triggers that you can trigger out of life, or some just characters that are just pure value when you play them out. Speaking of pure value, playing out 4 copies of Katakuri helps you manipulate your life, helps you manage your opponent's board as well. So on play, you can put a 8 cost or less character in the top bottom of either person's life, depending on which side it's on. Capone, just a great 2k counter trigger. You got to be running 4 copies of this. 3 copies of Satori, another 2k counter, which has a nice trigger. You can play it out. So these guys can't be used with your leader's ability, but they're just great cards. The other couple cards that can't be used by leader's ability is the Ace, the new Ace, the Rush Ace, running 3 copies of it. 10 cost on play, you recover a life, and then you have Rush if you have 2 or less life. The other one can't be used with your leader's ability is Brule, but it's just a nice trigger to have. and a nice cheap card to play it as well as a blocker. Now the cards that we can use with our leader's ability, let's talk about them. Running full playset of Atlas, so if your life is lower than your opponent's, this card cannot be carried by battle, so a good one to kind of play out early. And then the trigger if Vega Point Leader played out, which we're good to go there. Next up, 4 copies of Edison, which is a 2k counter. If you have 2 or less life cards, draw 2, trash 2. So a great way to kind of manipulate your hand if you need to. And then, of course, to be played out off a trigger. Shaka, really good blocker, 5 cost, 1000 counter. Can be played out with trigger. So you can pop that into your life. You can then get swung into, play it out. You can use your Katakuri to basically swing in, use the Katakuri, pop that back in your life. They can be played out again, which is really nice. The Robin, mainly going to be used for the trigger. Trigger is you can basically draw 2 cards, really good, so a great one to pop into your life. Frankie, good card, kind of all around, 2k counter. The trigger is draw 1, and if you have 1 or less life, you can play this card. So good at certain points to put in your life, so you can manipulate into your life early on. Good for you. Otherwise, just a card that you can play out or just save as a 2k counter. Just, yeah, great all-round card here. Luffy, great one here is form of removal. So the activate main is you can place this card in your trash. If you have 2 or less life, you can KO something with cost of 4 or less, then draw a card, and the trigger is you can KO something cost of 4 or less. So good either option if you want to play it out or put it in trash. Just got to be mindful of your life. You can ramp your life up fairly quickly, so just got to keep that in mind with this deck. Lilith is your searcher, which the trigger is to play itself out. You look at the top 5, reveal a egghead other than itself, add it to your hand, then put the rest at the bottom of your deck in any order. So you're searching for all these cards we're talking about here. And then the other card, which is really good, is Please Save Me. Absolutely insane. You can manipulate this into your life with your leader's ability. Is a counter, hardly use it as a counter, by the way. Mainly for the trigger, play 1 5 cost lower egghead character from your trash, which is basically all the characters we spoke about. Combos really well with Luffy. You can use Luffy's ability to trash itself, KO something, then pop this in your life, and then you can play the Luffy back out when you trigger that. Insane. And that kind of does it for our look at what the new leaders are going to be looking like so far in OP-07. We'll have some updated profiles down the track when we get more playtesting and happy with the builds a bit more, but great start for us, great start for you guys. We'd love to hear what you think of these kinds of videos, the deck profiles, in the comment section down below. But thank you so much for checking the video. Stay beautiful, and we'll see you all in the next one.